I'm Erica 29, and tonight was supposed to be a quick cameo crash. My sister's flashy Austin tech launch flash. A fake smile and ghost before drama kicked in. I stepped onto the buzzing event floor light, strobing bass pounding, and caught her eye roll sharp, like I was a nobody stealing her spotlight. Her crowd decked in slick suits and glittering dresses shot me glances that screamed I didn't fit. My worn leather jacket might as well have been a target. I was set to nod play it cool and split. Then her father-in-law, mid-sip of his bourbon, froze. His eyes locked on me, glass shaking in his hand. "That's her," he said, voice cutting through the noise. The room went dead quiet. Heads turned and my sister's perfect smile shattered. What he said next flipped my whole world upside down. If you've ever been counted out by your own family, drop a comment, smash that subscribe button, and stick around. This drama's just getting started. Back to being 10 in that cramped Dallas bedroom where Lindsay and I shared nothing but walls. She was 5 years older, the golden child of the family. Straight A's student council president, debate team captain. Lindsay was the pride Clifford and Janice paraded at every family barbecue. Their friends gushed over her trophies and Ivy League acceptance letters while I curled up in the corner, headphones, blasting scribbling song lyrics into a worn-out notebook. "Music's just a hobby," Erica Dad would say, voice thick with disappointment. "Get serious, be more like Lindsay." And whenever he turned away, I'd catch Lindsay's smug little smile, the quiet smirk of someone who knew the crown was already hers. By high school, our divide had grown into a chasm. Lindsay headed to Wharton, chasing a business degree to make Mom and Dad proud, while I fought for every music class I could squeeze into my schedule. I'd spend hours in the school's tiny recording studio teaching myself mixing boards and production software, dreaming of a music career. My parents didn't get it. They thought I was throwing away my future. "Why can't you be practical?" Like Lindsay, Mom would sigh at dinner, her fork hovering mid-air. Lindsay, home from college one weekend, piled on, "Not everyone's built for the real world, Mom." Her words hit like a punch, but I kept my head down and applied to Berklee College of Music anyway. Then came the betrayal that broke me. I'd applied for the Berklee Producers Scholarship, a full ride worth $20,000 to cover tuition. It was my shot to prove I didn't need their approval. The application required a family reference, and Lindsay, already a rising star at Wharton, offered to write it. "I've got you," she said, her smile never reaching her eyes. I trusted her, a mistake I'd regret. Weeks later, a professor on the committee, an old friend of my high school music teacher, pulled me aside. Lindsay's letter was poison, called me unfocused, and lacking discipline, questioned my drive. I lost the scholarship by a whisper. When I confronted her, Lindsay shrugged. I told the truth. "Erica, music's not a career." That night, I packed a bag, emptied my savings, and left a note saying I was done with her, done with them. 10 years on, I'd carved out a life in Austin, worked 3 jobs to afford studio time, clawed my way up in the music scene under the name E. Carver. Lindsay married Trevor Morrow, a tech investor with deep pockets, and launched her music streaming startup, the kind of success my parents framed in gold. We barely spoke holiday texts, occasional updates through our grandma Sylvia, who never stopped believing in my music. Sylvia was the one who convinced me to show up tonight. "She's still your sister," she'd said over the phone, her voice soft but firm. "You've come so far. Maybe it's time to mend things." Against my better judgment, I gave in, took a bus from my downtown loft, and walked into this lion's den. At the party, the buzz surrounded me. Tech bros pitching apps, investors clinking glasses. Lindsay gliding through it all like royalty. I lingered near the bar, nursing a soda and dodging small talk. A guy in a tailored suit, probably some startup founder, leaned in, his breath heavy with gin. "So what do you do, waitress, bartender?" I forced a smile, mumbled about freelance work, and watched his interest fade. Another woman, dripping in diamonds, joined in Austin's brutal, "How do you survive with no real job?" I bit my tongue, didn't mention the Grammy-nominated album I'd produced last year, or the sold-out festival I'd mixed. They'd already labeled me the struggling nobody, just like my family always had. Lindsay spotted me across the room, her smile tight as she broke away from a cluster of investors. She approached heels, clicking her navy dress, hugging her frame like it cost more than my rent. "You actually came," she said, her hug quick and cold like embracing a stranger. I nodded, regretting every step that brought me here. Sylvia insisted I said, wincing as I mentioned our grandma, knowing it sounded like I was here out of obligation. Lindsay's eyes narrowed, but she bounced back fast. "Well, Trevor's around somewhere. Come meet some people." She pulled me into a blur of introductions, her co-founders, investors, neighbors from their gated community. Each one followed the same script. "This is my sister Erica. She's figuring things out." The pity in their voices made my skin crawl. After the fifth introduction, I'd had enough, slipped back to the bar, ordered a ginger ale to ease the knot in my chest. That's when I overheard it, a low murmur from a nearby group. "That's her," one said, nodding my way. My heart stopped, thinking they meant me, but they were gossiping about Lindsay's latest deal, her startup's big break. Still, those words echoed what her father-in-law had said moments ago, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my world, carefully built away from this family, was about to come crashing down. My heart pounded as the words, "That's her," hung in the air. Lindsay's father-in-law, Vincent Lyle, staring at me like he'd seen a ghost. The party's buzz faded to a low hum, tech bros and investors pausing mid-sentence, their eyes darting between me and Vincent. Lindsay stood frozen across the room, her navy dress catching the light, her smile gone, replaced by a flicker of confusion. I gripped my ginger ale, the cold glass grounding me, and braced for whatever was coming. Vincent raised his bourbon glass, his hand steady now, and spoke loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, I didn't expect this tonight, but we're in the presence of a music legend, E. Carver, the genius behind last year's Grammy-nominated album, Pulse." Gasps rippled through the room. My stomach dropped. He'd just blown my cover, the name E. Carver, my shield from this family, now laid bare. "And she's right here," Vincent added, pointing at me, his smile warm but piercing. "Erica Stanton, Lindsay's sister." The room erupted whispers, turning to murmurs, heads craning to get a look. Lindsay's face drained of color, her eyes locking on mine, searching for answers. My parents, Clifford and Janice, stood near the bar, their expressions shifting from boredom to shock. I wanted to bolt, to disappear into the Austin night, but my feet stayed glued to the floor. Vincent stepped forward, his silver hair catching the strobe lights, and clapped a hand on my shoulder. "I've followed your work for years. Erica didn't know you were family until tonight." I forced a nod, my throat tight. "Thanks." I managed my voice barely above a whisper. The crowd pressed closer, some pulling out phones, others bombarding me with questions. "E. Carver." "Really?" one guy in a blazer asked, his tone half awe, half disbelief. "You produced Pulse. That album's a game changer." A woman in a sequined dress chimed in. "How do you keep that a secret?" I mumbled vague answers, my head spinning, trying to dodge the spotlight I'd spent a decade avoiding. Lindsay pushed through the crowd, her heels clicking sharp against the floor, and grabbed my arm. "Can we talk?" she said, her voice low, almost a hiss. I didn't resist. The air felt suffocating. She led me to a quieter corner near the venue's glass walls, overlooking Austin's skyline, twinkling against the night. Vincent followed, his wife, Maureen Lyle, at his side, her auburn hair swept into an elegant bun, her eyes soft but curious. Trevor, Lindsay's husband, trailed behind, his face unreadable. "What was that?" Lindsay demanded once we were out of earshot, her arms crossed tight. "E. Carver, you're telling me you're some big-shot producer and never said a word?" Her voice cracked. Not just anger, but something else. Betrayal, maybe. I met her gaze, my own anger simmering. "When did you ever ask Lindsay? You decided I was a failure years ago. Why would I bother telling you?" She flinched like I'd slapped her, but recovered fast. "That's not fair. We were worried about you." Your future, your stability. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Worried you wrote that letter for Berkeley, called me unfocused, undisciplined. You tanked my shot at a scholarship, $20,000 I needed to survive. Lindsay's eyes widened. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Trevor shifted uncomfortably, his hand brushing her shoulder, but stayed silent. Vincent cleared his throat, breaking the tension. Erica, I owe you an apology for putting you on the spot. He said, his tone genuine. I'm a silent partner in a music label. We worked with you on Pulse last year through your manager. Never connected the dots until I saw you tonight. I blinked, stunned. I'd dealt with his label remotely, never met in person. Your work's extraordinary, he continued, his eyes steady. That album redefined the genre you're mixing, your vision. I had no idea you were Lindsay's sister. Maureen stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. Vincent's been raving about E. Carver for months, she said, smiling faintly. He played Pulse. At our house, non-stop, said the producer was a genius. We didn't know it was you, dear. Her warmth caught me off guard, made my chest ache. No one in my family had ever called my work genius. Lindsay cut in, her voice sharper now. So you've been lying to us? Pretending you're scraping by when you're some celebrity? I shook my head, frustration boiling over. It's not lying, Lindsay. I built my life without you, without any of you. I didn't want your pity or your judgment. I turned to my parents, who'd drifted closer, Clifford's jaw tight, Janice clutching her purse like a shield. You never asked what I did, never cared. You had your perfect daughter, why bother with me? Janice's face crumpled, her voice soft. We didn't know, Erica. Clifford stayed silent, his eyes fixed on the floor. Lindsay's hands dropped, her anger giving way to something rawer. I didn't know either, she said, almost a whisper. You could have told me. I stared at her, memories of that Berkeley letter flashing back. I tried, Lindsay, back when I trusted you. You made sure that didn't happen again. Trevor finally spoke, his voice low, cautious. I knew, he said, drawing every eye. Lindsay spun toward him, her face a mix of shock and betrayal. What, she snapped. Trevor sighed, running a hand through his hair. I've followed the music scene for years, saw E. Carver's name pop up everywhere. When I met you at that festival last year, Erica, I put it together. Your voice. Your style. I didn't say anything because... He glanced at Lindsay, his expression torn. You always said she was struggling, didn't want to stir things up. Lindsay's breath hitched. She looked at me. Then Trevor, like the ground had shifted beneath her. You knew and didn't tell me, she said, her voice breaking. I stood there, my anger fading into exhaustion. This wasn't the victory I'd imagined. It was messier, heavier. Vincent touched my arm, his voice gentle. You don't have to explain yourself, Erica. Your work speaks for itself. But maybe... He glanced at Lindsay, then back at me. Maybe there's a chance to start over. I didn't answer, couldn't. The crowd was drifting back, some still whispering, others returning to their drinks. A woman in a red dress approached her, smile wide. Ms. Carver, I'm with a music festival board. Can we talk about a gig next year? I nodded, numb, handing her my card. More followed, producers, investors, even a journalist wanting an interview. Through it all, I felt Lindsay's eyes on me, her silence louder than the party's hum. As the questions piled up, Maureen pulled me aside, her hand warm on mine. I was like you once, she said, her voice low. Chased music in the 70s, my family called it a waste. I walked away, but you didn't. You built something incredible. Her words hit deep, stirring something I hadn't felt in years. I glanced at Lindsay, still standing with Trevor, her face a mask of conflict. For a moment, I saw the sister I'd lost before the smirks, before the letter. But the gap between us was too wide, too raw to cross tonight. The party roared back to life, music pulsing, glasses clinking, but I felt like an outsider again. Vincent's revelation had changed everything, yet nothing. My family knew the truth now, but what did that mean? I slipped toward the exit, needing air, needing space, knowing the hardest part was still ahead. The Austin skyline glittered beyond the glass walls, its lights mocking the storm brewing inside me as Lindsay dragged me onto the venue's rooftop terrace. Her grip on my arm was tight, her heels clacking against the concrete like gunfire. The party's hum faded behind us, replaced by the cool night air and the weight of a decade's worth of resentment. Vincent and Maureen Lyle followed, their faces etched with concern, while Trevor trailed at a distance, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Lindsay spun to face me, her eyes blazing under the terrace lights. "Explain yourself, Erica." Now she demanded, her voice a mix of fury and disbelief. I yanked my arm free, my own anger surging. "Explain. You're the one who needs to explain, Lindsay, why you wrote that letter for Berkeley, why you sabotaged my shot at $20,000. Her jaw dropped like I'd pulled a rug from under her, but I wasn't done. I reached into my leather jacket, pulled out a folded, worn-out paper I'd carried for years, and held it up. I kept a copy. Your words calling me unfocused, undisciplined, saying I'd never make it. You didn't just doubt me, you made sure I'd fail." Lindsay stared at the paper, her face paling under the dim glow. "Where did you get that?" She whispered, her voice barely audible. "The committee professor sent it to me, thought I deserved to know why I lost." I said, my voice steady despite the rage clawing at my chest. "You weren't protecting me. You were protecting your perfect image, making sure I stayed the screw-up sister." She flinched, her arms crossing tight like she could shield herself from the truth. Vincent stepped forward, his silver hair catching the moonlight. "Let's keep this calm," he said, his tone measured but firm. Maureen nodded, her auburn hair glinting as she touched Lindsay's shoulder. "This is a lot for everyone," she said, her voice soft but carrying weight. "Maybe there's a misunderstanding." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that echoed off the terrace. "No misunderstanding, Maureen. Lindsay knew exactly what she was doing, same way she's always known how to keep me down." Lindsay's eyes flashed, her composure cracking. "That's not true," she snapped, her voice rising. "I was 22, Erica, trying to help you see reason. Music was a pipe dream, you had no plan, no backup. I thought I was saving you from crashing and burning." Her words felt like a slap, same as they had 10 years ago. "Saving me." I shot back, my hands shaking. "I worked 3 jobs to afford studio time, slept on couches, ate cheap noodles for months because I had no safety net. You didn't save me. You pushed me off the cliff." Trevor cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the tension. "I tried to fix it," he said, drawing every gaze. Lindsay turned to him, her eyes wide with shock. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her tone sharp. Trevor sighed, running a hand through his hair. 2 years ago, I reached out to Erica through her manager, not directly, wanted to apologize for what happened with the scholarship. I thought maybe I could help, maybe fund a project to make up for it." He looked at me, his eyes heavy with regret. "You shut me down, said you didn't need my charity." I froze, memories of that email surfacing. I'd deleted it, furious at the idea of Amoro swooping in to save me. "You had no right," I said, my voice low, trembling. "You knew about the letter, knew what she did, and still kept quiet." Trevor nodded, his shoulders slumping. "I didn't want to hurt Lindsay. She was already stressed with the startup. I thought silence was better than stirring up old wounds." Lindsay's breath hitched, her eyes darting between us. "You both kept this from me," she said, her voice breaking. "Trevor, you knew she was E. Carver knew about the letter and didn't tell me." She stepped back like the betrayal had knocked her off balance. I watched her, my anger tangled with something else. Pity, maybe. "You built a story where you're the hero, Lindsay." I said, my voice quieter now. "The perfect sister who made all the right choices while I flopped. You never once checked if that story was true, never Googled my name, never asked Sylvia what I was doing." She shook her head, tears welling but not falling. "I didn't think you'd want me to," she said, almost a whisper. "After you left after that letter, I thought you hated me. I thought you were struggling, failing, and I I couldn't face it. Her admission hung between us raw and jagged. I wanted to scream, wanted to tell her how her choices had haunted me, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I folded the letter and shoved it back in my jacket, its edges worn from years of carrying it like a scar. Clifford and Janice had slipped onto the terrace standing near the glass railing, watching us like strangers. Erica Janice said, her voice tentative, almost pleading, "We didn't know about the letter about your career." Clifford nodded, his jaw tight. "If we'd known—" He started, then trailed off, unable to finish. I looked at them, my parents, who'd framed Lindsay's every achievement while dismissing mine. "You didn't want to know," I said, my voice flat. It was easier to believe I was the failure gave you a reason to keep praising her. Lindsay's tears spilled over her hands, clenching into fists. "I didn't mean for this," she said, her voice choked. "I was young, scared you'd ruin your life. I thought I was doing the right thing." I met her eyes, saw the guilt, the regret, but it didn't erase the years I'd spent rebuilding from nothing. "You thought wrong," I said, my words, heavy, final. Vincent broke the silence, his voice gentle but firm. "This isn't unsalvageable," he said, looking between us. "Families fight, make mistakes, but they can heal." Maureen nodded, her hand resting on Vincent's arm. "You're both strong women. Maybe it's time to see each other clearly." I glanced at Lindsay, her face a mess of tears and defiance, and felt the weight of Vincent's words. Healing sounded nice, clean, but the wounds were too deep, too fresh. The terrace door swung open, a catering staffer poking her head out. "Mrs. Morrow, the guests are asking for you," she said, her voice cutting through the moment. Lindsay wiped her eyes, her composure snapping back like a mask. "I'll be there," she said, her voice steady now. She looked at me one last time, then turned and walked back inside, her heels echoing in the night. I stayed put, my chest tight, staring at the skyline as the others drifted back to the party. Trevor lingered, his voice low. "I'm sorry, Erica, for everything." I didn't respond, couldn't. The letter in my pocket felt heavier than ever, a reminder of what we'd lost, what we might never get back. As the city lights blurred below, I knew one thing for sure: this fight wasn't over. The terrace door clicked shut behind Lindsay, her heels fading into the party's pulse, leaving me alone with the Austin skyline and a knot in my chest that wouldn't loosen. I leaned against the glass railing, cool air brushing my face, trying to shake the weight of our fight. The letter in my jacket pocket felt like a stone, a reminder of the years I'd lost to her betrayal. Vincent and Maureen Lyle lingered nearby, their faces soft with concern, while Trevor hovered awkwardly, his apology still ringing in my ears. Clifford and Janice. My parents stood by the terrace edge, their silence louder than the city below. Maureen broke the quiet, her voice steady but warm. "Erica, may I share something?" she said, stepping closer, her auburn hair catching the moonlight. I nodded too, drained to argue. She clasped her hands, her eyes distant. "In the 70s, I was a singer, chased gigs in smoky bars, wrote songs nobody heard. My parents called it a waste, said I'd end up broke, shaming the family. I fought them for years, scraped by on tips and dreams, but eventually I gave up. Married Vincent, chose stability." She paused, her gaze meeting mine. "You didn't give up. You built E-Carver from nothing, something I never had the courage to do." Her words hit deep, stirring a mix of pride and ache. "I had to," I said, my voice low. "No one believed I could not, Lindsay, not them." I glanced at my parents, Clifford's jaw tight, Janice's eyes glistening. Maureen smiled faintly, her hand brushing my arm. "They're starting to see you now," she said, her tone gentle. "Families can be blind, judge what they don't understand, but they can change." Vincent nodded, his silver hair glinting. "We've seen it with our own kids," he said, his voice calm. "Mistakes pile up, misunderstandings too, but there's always a way back." I looked at Lindsay's silhouette through the glass doors, her navy dress weaving through the crowd, and wondered if he was right. The gap between us felt like a canyon too wide to cross in one night, but Maureen's story lingered a spark of possibility. Trevor cleared his throat, his voice hesitant. I should have pushed harder, he said, his hands still in his pockets. When you shut down my apology 2 years ago, I let it go, thought it was easier to keep the peace. I was wrong. I met his eyes, saw the regret, but didn't respond. His silence after knowing about the Berkeley letter had hurt almost as much as Lindsay's words. I don't need your guilt, Trevor, I said, finally my tone flat. I needed you to speak up back then. Before he could reply, a small figure darted onto the terrace, Nora Lindsay's 6-year-old daughter, her dark curls bouncing in a sparkly dress. Auntie Erica, she squealed, tugging my jacket. I froze, her bright eyes catching me off guard. I'd met her only once, a brief visit years ago, but her grin was infectious. Mommy said you make music, cool music. Can I hear it? She asked, her voice bubbling with excitement. I crouched to her level, my heart softening despite the chaos. Sure, kiddo, I said, smiling for the first time all night. I've got some tracks you might like. Maybe we can listen together sometime. Nora's eyes widened, her hands clapping. Tomorrow, she pressed, her enthusiasm unstoppable. I laughed, a real laugh, feeling a warmth I hadn't expected. Maybe not tomorrow, but soon, I promised, ruffling her curls. Lindsay appeared at the door, her face still raw from our fight, but her expression softened, seeing Nora with me. She stepped forward, her voice cautious. Nora, don't bother your aunt, she said, her eyes flicking to mine. Nora pouted, her arms crossing. She's not bothering me, I said, standing up, meeting Lindsay's gaze. For a moment we stood there, sisters, strangers, something unspoken passing between us. Lindsay took a breath, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry, Erica, for the letter, for everything. I was jealous, scared you'd outshine me if you succeeded. I didn't know how to handle it. Her words trembled, raw, unguarded. I stared at her, saw the guilt etched in her face, and felt my anger waver. You could have talked to me, I said, my voice steady but heavy. Instead, you broke my trust, left me to pick up the pieces alone. She nodded, tears spilling over. I know, she said, her hands twisting together. I don't expect you to forgive me, not tonight. Maybe not ever. But I want to try, if you'll let me. I didn't answer, couldn't. The hurt was too deep, too tangled with years of silence. But Nora's small hand slipped into mine, her warmth grounding me, and I realized I didn't want to shut her out, not entirely. Clifford stepped forward, his voice gruff. We owe you an apology too, he said, his eyes avoiding mine. We pushed you away, focused on Lindsay, thought you'd figure it out. We were wrong. Janice nodded, her voice choked. We're proud of you. Erica should have said it sooner. Their words felt like a punch. Everything I'd craved as a kid, now bitter with time. Proud now, I said, my tone sharp. Because Vincent outed me as E. Carver. Where was that pride when I was eating ramen to survive? They flinched, Janice's hand covering her mouth, but didn't argue. Maureen spoke up, her voice firm. It's not too late, she said, looking at us all. Your family, messy, flawed, but family. Start small, build from there. I glanced at Nora, her eyes bright, oblivious to the weight around her, and felt a tug. Maybe Maureen was right. Maybe small was enough for now. Lindsay wiped her eyes, her voice steadier. Nora's birthday is next month, she said, hesitant. It's just a small party at our place. Would you come? The invitation hung there, fragile, a first step. I looked at Nora, her hopeful grin, and felt something shift. I'll think about it, I said, my voice soft, but not closed off. Lindsay nodded, her face a mix of relief and uncertainty. Vincent clapped his hands, breaking the tension. Let's get back inside, he said, his tone light. The party's not over, plenty of folks want to talk to E. Carver. He winked, his warmth easing the air. We filed back in, Nora still clinging to my hand, her chatter filling the silence. The party roared on, tech bros and investors buzzing, but something had changed. Lindsay walked beside me, close but not touching, her presence less hostile, more human. I caught sight of Sylvia's name on my phone, a text from earlier unread. Be brave, my girl. You're stronger than you know. I smiled, tucking it away. The night wasn't done, neither was our story, but for the first time I saw a crack in the wall between us, a chance to build something new, however small. 1 year later, I stood backstage at Austin's Zilker Park lights pulsing across the crowd, music vibrating through the ground as my charity concert kicked off. The event was my brainchild, a fundraiser for local music programs, giving kids like I once was a shot at their dreams. The stage glowed with talented young artists I'd mentored, their voices soaring over the thousands who'd shown up. I scanned the sea of faces, my heart steady, but heavy, knowing Lindsay and Nora were out there somewhere, but my parents, Clifford and Janice, weren't. Their absence stung, a reminder that some wounds heal slower than others. The past year had been a slow climb. Lindsay and I had met a few times, awkward lunches, at first stilted calls about Nora's school plays or my latest project. We were trying, building something fragile from the rubble of our past, but trust came hard. I'd gone to Nora's birthday, a small backyard party where she'd dragged me to her karaoke machine, belting out my tracks with a grin that melted my defenses. Lindsay had watched us, her eyes soft, cautious, offering a smile that felt like a truce. But my parents kept their distance, sent a stiff email about my concert claiming scheduling conflicts. I didn't push. Their silence spoke louder than words. Wesley Tate, my old friend and fellow musician, nudged me, his guitar slung over his shoulder. You ready for this, Carver? He teased, his grin wide under the stage lights. I laughed, shoving him lightly. Born ready, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Wesley had been my rock through the chaos, jamming with me in dive bars, cheering when I launched the Carver Music Fund, a scholarship for young artists with big dreams and empty pockets. Tonight was as much his victory as mine. The MC's voice boomed, introducing the night's finale. I stepped onto the stage, mic in hand, facing the crowd's roar. Thank you, Austin, I said, my voice carrying over the cheers. This is for every kid told their passion's a dead end, for every dreamer who kept going anyway. The band struck up my latest production, a soulful anthem, and the crowd swayed, phones glowing like stars. I spotted Nora near the front, her sparkly dress catching the light, bouncing with excitement. Lindsay stood beside her, her face unreadable but present. Halfway through the set, Lindsay climbed the stage steps unannounced, her navy blazer sharp against the lights. The band faltered. I froze, my heart racing as she took the mic. Can I say something? She asked the crowd, hushing, curious. I nodded, bracing myself. She turned to the audience, her voice trembling but clear. I'm Lindsay Morrow, Erica's sister. A year ago, I made mistakes, hurt her, doubted her when I should have been her biggest fan. She's not just Carver, a music legend, she's my sister, and I'm so proud of her. Her eyes met mine, glistening with tears. I'm sorry, Erica, for everything. The crowd erupted, cheers and applause, swallowing the moment, but I stood still, my throat tight. Her words were raw, public, undeniable, but they didn't erase the past. I stepped forward, took the mic, my voice calm but firm. Thanks, Lindsay, I said, holding her gaze. I hear you were working on it. But tonight's about these kids, about music, about building something bigger than us. The crowd roared again, sensing the weight, but lifting it with their energy. Lindsay nodded, her face a mix of relief and regret, then stepped back, letting the music take over. I finished the set, pouring everything into the final notes, feeling the crowd's pulse sync with mine. Backstage, Nora rushed me, her arms wrapping tight. You were awesome, Auntie Erica, she squealed, her curls bouncing. I hugged her back, my heart full. Lindsay approached, hesitant, her hands clasped. That was a lot, she said, her voice soft. I meant it, all of it. I nodded, not ready to dive deeper but not shutting her out. I know, I said, my tone even. Let's keep talking, slow but real. Vincent and Maureen Lyle joined us, their smiles warm. Incredible night, Erica. Vincent set his hand on my shoulder. Your funds changing lives, count us in for next year. Maureen hugged me, her voice low. You're doing what I never could. Keep going. Their support grounded me, a contrast to my parents' absence, but I felt a pang wishing Clifford and Janice had seen this. Wesley reappeared, his guitar case in hand. Drinks to celebrate, he asked, his eyes twinkling. I grinned, nodding. Only if you're buying, I teased, feeling lighter. Lindsay lingered, Nora tugging her hand. Can we come too? Nora piped up, her eyes wide. I glanced at Lindsay, saw the hope in her face, and nodded. Sure, kiddo, let's make it quick. As we left the park, city lights sprawling ahead, I thought of Sylvia's text from that night a year ago. Be brave, my girl. I'd carried it with me through the fights, the silences, the small steps toward something new. Lindsay walked beside me, Nora between us, her chatter filling the gaps. My parents' absence was a shadow, but I didn't need their approval anymore. I'd built Carver built this night on my own terms. The road ahead wasn't clear, trust would take time, boundaries would hold, but I was ready to walk it one note at a time.